5 million, was it? Or much more, if you'll come with me to Camino to be cloned.
What's up, meta nerds? This video will be the complete Legends life story of Jango Fett. Unlike with the Cody documentary where we combine the canon and Legends lore, Jango's story has a lot that simply is mutually exclusive. The most obvious is his upbringing. For sure, Jango Fett in Legends is Mandalorian, and was one of the single most important Mandalores throughout the entire history. You would have to look back to the times of the ancient Mandoade to find anyone that could rival his legacy. I think it's pretty cool that there's such a big out-of-universe debate on who is and isn't truly Mandalorian, how that should be defined, and so forth. Because that was a huge debate within Mandalorian culture inside of the lore, as you will see with the conflicts that were raging when Jango was still just a young boy. So these videos will cover each and every bit of lore on Jango Fett, from birth through death, and even look at how his son Boba would carry on the Mandalorian legacy, and strengthen their culture. But let's go back to 66 BBY. On the Outer Rim world of Concord Dawn, within the Mandalore sector, the newborn Jango was taken home by his mother and father to their farm. The Fett family farm was one of several large and highly productive farming operations on the agricultural world of Concord Dawn, something of the breadbasket of Mandalorian space. The ancient crusading Mandalorians of the Old Republic era had conquered this world thousands of years ago, and the people that immigrated here became the ancestors of this now Mandoa world. Though not a luscious planet, these were a hardworking people that were able to turn the arid terrain into a surplus. And though in the Outer Rim, crime was never a problem here, the Mandalorian culture instilled a strong sense of self-reliance, training in both hand-to-hand combat and weaponry for each and every member of the population. The people of Concord Dawn were known throughout the galaxy to be both incredibly tough and honorable. This planet was ruled by a governor who oversaw the Journeyman Protectors, a law enforcement group that upheld the Mandoa codes of honor. One anecdote comes from Horvath, who ate a human convict from Concord Dawn, but before he devoured him, he was told that the laws there were so strict that even cheating in games is a capital offense. So this was the environment Jango and his sister Arla grew up in. We also need to keep in mind that in 738 BBY, the Jedi launched the attack on Mandalore that would result in lasting environmental destruction, pushing them into the biocubes and dome cities that now dot the lifeless deserts, on what had always been a vibrant green and blue world. And culturally, this war gave rise to a faction called the New Mandalorians. These were pacifists who would eventually produce those like Duchess Satine who reigned during the Clone Wars. But there were still militant-minded mercenary Mandos throughout the galaxy. On Concord Dawn, the Journeyman Protector in charge of the district containing the Fett's farm was a man who went by the name Jaster Muriel. Remember, the law had things on the book that could see you executed for lying, so when Jaster learned of the deep corruption of a superior officer, he felt bound by duty to kill him. The other superiors did not agree, and had Jaster exiled from Concord Dawn, upon which he would join the Mandalorians that were still acting as warriors, not the pacifists who were growing in strength on Mandalore, while Fett's father would fill the new opening in the Journeyman Protectors. This was all decades before Jango's birth, sometime around 90 to 70 BBY, and those warrior Mandos had splintered into two groups that were now waging a full civil war. And so now you had three factions. Of course, they each believed that they were the true Mandalorians, but Jaster Muriel understood branding enough to call his forces the True Mandalorians, and they were fighting against Death Watch, led by Tor Vizsla. The Death Watch Mandos wanted to up their violence, return to the lost age of Mandalorian crusaders who set the galaxy ablaze during the time of the Old Republic, believing that might made right. Anyone who could not defeat them was by definition their inferior, and deserving of subjugation. While the true Mandalorians followed what was called the Super Commando Codex, a new code of honor for these new times. Now the term Mandalore meant sole ruler in the Mandoa language, a term that dated back to Mandalore the Conqueror over 4,000 years ago. As leader of the true Mandalorians, Jaster Muriel took up the title Mandalore, and with this he wanted to reaffirm the warrior codes. But with his own twists, he and his followers felt that the old ways were too violent. There was no honor in being a bloodthirsty marauder blindly tearing through anything that came before them. Death Watch and Vizsla claimed that this was the very definition of Mandalorian, that of course claiming the name True Mandalorian was just a semantic trick to distract from the fact that this Jaster character was changing what it meant to be Mando. In 58 BBY, Jaster Muriel found his forces in the middle. The pacifists, New Mandos thought he was too violent, Death Watch thought he was too weak, and this civil war would come to Concord Dawn. Jaster's forces were being routed, and he was now being hunted on his homeworld. Vizsla shouting out, quote, "You can't escape me, Jaster. I'll burn all your hiding places to the ground." and execute anyone who helps you. Days later, we see a young Jango Fett making his way through the fields, noticing odd footprints in the mud. His father would startle him and remind the boy that he needs to get to work fixing the harvester and stop playing detective. When Jango asks what the basket is for, his dad says it was for a beggar in the fields. The boy would go on to work repairing the machine under the hot sun, when a group of armed men descend on him. They ask if he's seen any strangers around these parts, and after a brave response, the leader threatens to kill the boy. We see that even at just 8 years old, young Jango is very observant. He admits that he had seen some tracks of someone wearing soldier boots, and that his dad was taking food to someone. With this information, the thugs force the boy to lead them to the Fett family farm. The Mandos fan out and cover the area, using the threat of a blaster to the boy's head. The father comes out to confront Vizsla and Death Watch. They subdue him and violently proceed with their interrogation. Battered and bloodied, Jango sees that his father does not back down, instead stating that he is a journeyman protector, that he is the law. Death Watch is unimpressed and grab Jango by the hair, saying, quote, "Answer me or your kid will be wearing your brains." Tears pour out of Jango's eyes, but just then a blaster bolt whizzed by and directly through the visor of the armored Mando. Everyone is stunned, Jango looking at his dead captor, Vizsla whipping around only to see Mama Fett with a smoking blaster rifle. His father knows this is the boy's only chance, shouts for him to run, and more tears fall as Jango sprints into the tall vegetation. As he gets deeper into the field, he is snatched up by another band of armored, blaster-wielding Mandos. But they open fire on the Death Watch thugs that had chased after Jango. And back at the Fett homestead, we see that Vizsla heard this firefight in the bush. He decided to burn down the fields to chase the true Mando forces out. And as for Jango's family, Vizsla coldly says that they should be quickly put to death so that they could just move on. His father, mother, and sister were just a side note, a bunch of inconsequential objects in Vizsla's way. He has them senselessly killed and tossed aside. In the fields, Jaster was mobilizing his forces, and turns to the sobbing boy to tell him simply that his family was dead. He would need to come with the Mandos to survive. And though devastated, young Jango sees that he has to spring to the rescue, as the true Mando forces are becoming lost. He pushes past Jaster and leads the way, knowing which trails to take through his family fields. The boy leads them into an irrigation tube, and Jango says that they could travel through the tunnels to exit on the other side of the farm. Though Jaster's second-in-command, Montross, worries that they might get boiled alive. They would emerge, and the true Mando forces said that they need to catch Vizsla as he resupplies. And again, the 8-year-old boy steps up, showing his incredible bravery and intelligence. He says he knows where they will be selling food and power cells in the nearest town. Jaster asks the boy if he can shoot, and when he gets a yes, he says that his father was a good man for teaching Jango how to use a blaster. In the dusty streets of town, Death Watch storms in on their armored personnel carrier, looking forward to 2 days of pillaging and conquering. One of the Mandos would act as a cripple, and once pushed, he whips around and blasts through the armor at close range. Jaster and Montross were in position to encircle them, raining down fire from all directions, providing Jango the opportunity to run underneath the vehicle and place an explosive. Once clear, he gives the command to detonate the APC. The explosions engulf the streets in flames and shrapnel, and as Jango runs, he sees the Mandos sharpshooting Death Watch left and right. And then he notices that Vizsla's second-in-command was cowering in shock. The boy raises the blaster to his head, exclaiming, "You killed my family." The only response he gets was matter of fact, saying they were just casualties of war, kid, before a hidden blade pops out and nearly severs the boy's head. Jaster was searching the battlefield but sees that Vizsla had escaped. Jango was now scrambling for his blaster, and in this very first battle, he is able to whip around and get a shot into the man's chest. His whole life had changed forever in just a few hours. He was now an orphan and had taken a man's life. But this was the story of many foundlings that were adopted into the ranks of Mandalorians. Jaster places a hand on the distraught youth, showing he was proud, but saying they needed to go, now. Taking the boy into his arms and picking him up, Jaster asks if he feels better now, to which Jango replies, "Not yet." Jaster knew that this was a Mandalorian answer. Over the next 6 years, Jaster would raise Jango as his adoptive son. His suit of armor would be mostly green with red accents, with the armor on his shoulders and knees being yellow, a look that would be adopted by his son decades later. He would now be 14 years old, and granted his first leadership role, and we see that all respected him among the ranks. In their mothership that served as their base of operations, his close friend Silas knew that Jango was excited about being given a squad. Jaster calls a meeting and says that since this was Jango's first time as squad commander, the mission would be a simple extraction. Corda Defense was paying these mercs to save one of their rookie squads that was pinned down on the inner rim world of Corda 6. The report said enemy forces were poorly armed and disorganized, and second in command Montross gives the units their objectives. Jaster would be in charge of the ground forces, clearing out the LZ, and as Jaster moves with his squad to the dropships, he turns to his adoptive son and says to make him proud. Montross is mobilizing his unit, but turns to the young man to make an odd statement, feeling the need to remind him that Jaster was not his real father, that this loyalty between them could cloud his judgment, and maybe hurt his ability to make the right decision for the clan, a mistake Montross hopes Jango will not make. With this strange send-off, the dropships race out of the capital ship hangar. Jango reminds his boys to check their ammo, and to keep an eye on each other. He wants to make sure his first command sees each of his brothers home. But within seconds, they get hit by a flurry of ion cannon fire. Their ship had lost all power and was forced to make a crash landing. Though this was a rough start, Jango tries to keep them focused. As the ramp descends, these first seconds of his battlefield command, several of his men are killed instantly, blaster bolts to the head dropping them at his feet, and the 14-year-old commander tells his units to find cover in the muddy trenches. Jango was furious with their allies' poor intel. The enemy forces were both well-armed and highly organized. The dropships were all being peppered with bolts from mounted weaponry. The Mandalorians were one of the toughest forces in the galaxy, pushing ahead with gauntlet flamethrowers engaged, and soaring overhead with their iconic jetpacks. Jango pushes forward and tries to calm Jaster, but his casualties keep increasing, forcing him back behind cover. Jaster calls all forces to regroup on Jango, but Montross and the Flyboys want to push the fight to the mounted guns. The Mandalore gives a direct order to retreat, but this is ignored. Montross's forces do kill several foes, but an enemy grenade kills many of his men. Even he would have died if Jaster had not come to the rescue. Still, the leader says that they are retreating. They cannot continue with a plan that was based off of bad intel. And as they make their way down the hill, Jaster calls his second-in-command's plan idiotic, but notes that Jango took initiative and used this distraction to sneak around the target. His unit made its way through the forest and was now in an open area, where the Allied security forces were supposedly in hiding waiting for evac. Just as they step into the clearing, Death Watch erupts from under the brush and opens fire. Jango immediately recognizes them and has to catch his friend Silas up to speed about the bad blood between Vizsla and Jaster. Jango would personally kill many of them with blaster, explosive, and flamethrower, before telling his Mandalore that their friends were behind this whole botched mission. Jaster asks if he sees Vizsla, and right on cue, his arch-rival emerges from an enormous vehicle. The Mandalore says that they would have been safely off-world by now if Montross hadn't rushed ahead, and declares that if they do survive, Montross would no longer be a part of the True Mandalorians. Vizsla fires a rocket that scatters them. As Montross soars above his leader, he says that he's done taking orders. He leaves Jaster to die, and within seconds, the laser cannons from the Death Watch vehicle rip through the Mandalorian's armor, disintegrating his knee to immobilize him, followed by several bolts through his torso. And in the cockpit, Vizsla says to himself that he can finally wipe the name Jaster Mareel from Mandalorian history. Jango had emerged from the forest just in time to witness his adoptive father's death, but his friend pulls him back from rushing into the bolts. Vizsla was too much of a coward to fight his sworn enemy honorably, and upon seeing Jango's unit, he peels off in his vehicle and flees the scene. Jango makes his way over to their downed Mandalore, removing his helmet to look into the eyes of the man who saved his life all those years ago. Meanwhile, at the LZ, we see Montross rushing the forces to evac, claiming Jango had died trying to rescue Jaster. But as they are boarding the dropships, they see the adoptive son come over the hill, Mandalore lying dead in his arms. Montross says that if he wants to honor Jaster, he should realize that as second in command, he should now be the leader. But Jango says they cannot follow someone who let their Mandalore die alone on the battlefront. And blasters raise all around him, Montross realizing that Jango's act of bravery over the years had won the hearts of his fellow Mandos. He is outraged that his coup had failed, bested by a 14-year-old young man, but he has no choice but to flee. All the true Mandalorians recognize Jango Fett as Jaster's legacy, and to honor him, he would now sport the black and red markings of their fallen leader. Jango would reign as the new Mandalore for the next 18 years, all the while never giving up on his burning passion to get revenge on the man that had killed both his entire family and then his adoptive father. This rage honed him into a weapon, rivaling the greatest Mandalorians in their thousands of years of warrior history. Finally, he had tracked Vizsla to the outer rim world of Galadran, and They were hired by the governor of this world to put down a local insurrection, and the rebels were all killed with a dazzling display of deadly limbs, blasters, and rockets. Victorious, Fett would make his way to the governor's castle, where we see the leader of this world was trembling with fear. Jango took this job because he knew that the governor was secretly funding the rebuilding of Death Watch. Blaster raised, he calls out this alliance, and demands to know the location of Vizsla. When the governor pathetically denies any knowledge, his eyes give away a clue, looking off to the corner of the room. Out of the curtains rush the cowardly sect of Mandos, blaster bolts flying through the air and tearing apart the plush quarters, as the Mandalore ducks behind a column and shouts, "You've crossed the wrong man, Governor," before using the jetpack to fly through a window. He sends some parting shots back at Death Watch, but before he can escape, Vizsla shows his own sharpshooting skills and lands a bolt into the jetpack. It smokes and sputters out, but Vizsla doubts that his enemy is dead. Just then, the Jedi emerge in their consular-class cruisers. As per the governor's plan with Death Watch, he begged the Jedi Order to help him, claiming that the Mandalorians were killing political activists, and Vizsla says to tell them that Jango was ordering the deaths of women and children too, before Vizsla promises to go and provide those bodies to show the Jedi as evidence. Back in the wilderness, we see the Mandalore dropping out of the sky, but making a relatively safe landing in a snowbank. But the fall had damaged his comlink, and Jango knows that the Jedi may be the only warriors in the galaxy that could give his forces a tough fight. He races through the snow trying to call out to his commander, but nothing is getting through. A Jedi named Dooku was leading the strike team, and they already had the location of the Mandalorian camp long before the ships even landed, encircling the warrior's position as Jango frantically tries to make his way down to his men. The Jedi activate their blades, and Dooku makes his introduction, reading off the accusations and informing these hardened professional killers that they were now under arrest. And when Dooku's Padawan Kamari Vosa says that if the Mandos want to fight, the Jedi will end it quickly, Fett orders his men to open fire, and to kill her first. He knows that he cannot allow these saber-wielding sorcerers close in on him, but is surprised by how efficient these Jedi were at sending bolts back to the Mandalorians. Quickly, the Mandalore has to change the plan, ordering a shift to explosives, and as rockets come flying at the circle of Jedi, they are forced down into the pit where Jango's forces would suffer their first losses. His second-in-command, Miles, soars above them to rain down fire from above, but a quick-reacting Jedi would leap up to intercept, severing the Mandalorian in half, the two pieces of his friend falling right in front of Jango. Enraged, he would seem to embody the ancient war god of the Mandawade. Out of weapons, he used his bare hands to rip a Jedi from behind and strike at their spine, pick up a rock and bash in their skulls, and use his athleticism to outmaneuver and headbutt a sixth Jedi. A critical wound that would cause a hemorrhage, blood spewing out of the Jedi's mouth, before he fell dead before a Fett. This killing of 6 Jedi with his bare hands was enough to solidify Jango's notorious reputation throughout the galaxy, but he would fall to his knees, knowing that he was surrounded. Dooku's team had killed all of the other Mandalorians. In Jango's eyes, these were the only true Mandalorians left in the galaxy. The name Fett would now be infamous throughout the Jedi Order, and Dooku stared at the carnage that also cost him half of his Jedi. A mission that he thought was just the latest of the Council's poor decisions, dragging the Jedi into a corrupted position as political warriors. Dooku would turn Fett over to the governor of Galadran, who then sold him into slavery while also backing the rise of Death Watch. From the rank of Mandalore, the sole ruler of the Mandalorians, he was now just another anonymous slave working in a spice ship. It would be 2 years in this soul-crushing environment, until one fateful day when pirates became his unknowing rescuers. His chains were broken in the firefight, and the moment he saw an opening, he grabs a blaster and blows away his overlord, before using the chaos to commandeer a ship to make his escape, heading right back to Galadran. The governor got word of Jango's escape, but did not have time to prevent the fallen Mandalore from getting what he came for. All these years, the governor had Jango's armor on display, but he didn't leave it in the original paint, however, stripping the black and red coats to show the polished metal and adding new blue accents. As he says to his droid assistant while rushing to his personal museum, quote, "I didn't spend thousands restoring that suit to have it stolen by that thug." The true owner, the last of the true Mandalorians, was already ready for combat and in the gleaming armor tells the governor to give up the location of Vizsla. The governor knows that this madman was not playing around and tells him that Death Watch was headed to Corellia. Moments later, in Vizsla's flagship, his engineer tells him that he's detecting a starfighter, and in just seconds the vessel crashes into the engine array. This single, precise strike had disabled their sublight engines, and their life support systems were quickly fading. In the command bridge window, they spot what looks like a missile, only to have Vizsla realize, to his horrified surprise, that it was Fett. Wrist rockets blow through the transparasteel window. As usual, the cowardly Mando pretender was fleeing down the corridors, hoping the blast doors would cut Jango off, but that trusty jetpack shot him into a roll that resulted in a swift punch to the jaw. Fett knocks him down and pulls his dual Westar 34 blasters on him, but Vizsla shows that he was leader of his forces for good reason. He could fight when he wanted to, stripping the blasters away, saying, quote, "I guess Jaster didn't finish your education before I killed him, so let me show you how to open a man's throat with your fingers." But the attack on the vessel was leading to chain reactions of explosions throughout the ship. A blast separates them and stuns Jango, which his archenemy takes advantage of, delivering an elbow to the throat and leaving the once Mandalore to go down with the ship. He orders everyone to evacuate on escape pods, and just as he opens the door to his pod, he senses the Blue Devil launching himself at him, uttering only a pathetic "no," before Jango grabbed hold of him and proceeded to beat him senseless the entire way down to the surface of Corellia. But Vizsla would use the crash landing to break free from Fett and then run and hide in the bush. And as Jango emerged, he opens up with a blast from his flamethrower. Fett boosts over the spray and drop kicks his enemy to the ground. Local predators, the dire cats, were taking notice of these two food sources and watched as Fett delivered blow after blow, knocking Vizsla into a river. But in a split second, he would get a whipcord shot off to wrap up Fett's legs, pulling him down into the water with him. With his legs bound, we see that Jango loses his advantage. His blade would come out and pierce Jango's skin. Another cowardly move. The faux Mando used poison against Fett, something that was making it nearly impossible just to stay conscious. Vizsla would then grab a large stick and proceed to bombard Jango's helmet, eventually knocking it clean off. Instead of finishing the kill, he gloats, telling the adoptive son that Jaster would be disappointed. And thinking back to that day in the hangar, when Jaster looked at him on his first mission and said, "Make me proud," Jango calls on something within him, gets a second wind, and activates his own gauntlet blade. And with this rage, he spins around and cuts open Vizsla's belly. His arch enemy for 20 years now, the man who killed both his family and adoptive father, was now trying to keep from bleeding out. He tries to act tough, but Jango tells him that he won't kill him, but they will, as the dire wolves launch from cover to devour Vizsla alive, denying Vizsla a respectable death at the hands of another Mandalorian. Though vengeance was sweet, he felt the darkness of death consuming him as well. The poison would leave him unconscious for about 12 hours. Jango thought surely he was going to die, but he comes to with a group of horrified children staring into his eyes. His vision comes back, and with a pounding head, he stumbles to his feet, noting that the beast must not have devoured him because the poison made him smell like he was already dead and rotting. When the kids ask where he was going, he replies simply, "To find a job." His journey so far was a small-scale version of what happened to the Mandalorians thousands of years ago. Once their Mandalore was broken and defeated by Revan, they all split up into smaller clans, becoming bands of mercenaries taking odd jobs, falling a long way from their massive and terrifying armies of conquerors. So though this Mandalore was still alive, he had no people to lead. Whatever was left of Death Watch were his enemies, and he felt no connection to the pacifist new Mandalorians. He too would become a bounty hunter, and just as he rose to become the greatest of the Mandalorians, he would start his climb to the title of the best bounty hunter in the galaxy, with the help of this updated gear. Now, a lot of this was already in the suit, but thanks to the governor wanting to show off, it was all in new condition. Starting with the boots, they had magnetomic adhesion, allowing him to stay in place when in zero-G, something that helped a lot of droid units, and which would later be incorporated into the clone troopers. The knee pads each had rocket dart launchers, a nasty little trick when locked in melee combat, and on the thighs rested a pair of Westar 34 blasters. This little silver beauty was a modern marvel. It packed more power than most blaster rifles out there, a damage output that was only rivaled by the later DL-44, a weapon that was banned by the Empire, and was one of the many things that made Han Solo so deadly. To help with his quick draw, he further modified the gun to be lighter by removing much of the handle. This little button would indicate when the power pack was running low, but the Westar 34 packed a punch and could fire hundreds of bolts before needing to be replenished, which was made incredibly easy with these combined Tabana gas and power cell cartridges in one unit. These cartridges were so small that the pouches Jango wore on his belt could contain more than enough ammo for any mission. This sash underneath is actually to honor the position held by his father and adoptive father before that, as it is the traditional sash binding of the Journeyman Protectors, a nice integration of his two backgrounds. Moving up, we see this vest under the armor plating. This was an extra layer of defense to protect his vital organs. an energized blast dissipation vest that would scatter the energy of blaster bolts, working much like a bulletproof vest in the sense that it might not be harmless, but at least life-saving. And this is actually something that the much boohooed Stormtrooper armor did as well. Each of the gauntlets were essentially interchangeable weapon mounts, and Jango's standard loadout was a projectile dart shooter, whipcord thrower, retractable blade, and variable munitions launcher. Now looking at the helmet, these two small triangular objects are a part of what was called the pineal gland sensor system, which worked with the HUD in the helmet to essentially allow Fett to see behind him. And under the helmet were these coverings over the ears that connected him to various comm systems, some of which would be connected back to the Slave One, which were also made to protect him from sonic weaponry. While the targeting rangefinder is a Mando classic, giving all sorts of environmental data and helping with target acquisition. The jetpack was an iconic Mandalorian symbol, and we see that he used both the Z6 and JT-12 model. They have a lot in common, but the main difference was the type of missile loaded into the top, these things over here, and the thrust exhaust and gimbaling thrust nozzle positions. A neat feature is that this missile can be swapped out for a variety of different types of explosives, and even a grappling hook. Though this equipment all helped to accent his deadly set of skills, this first year would have a major setback. In 41 BBY, Jango would somehow lose his armor. The exact details of this are unclear, but we learn of this through a woman named Sheikah Tull, someone who had been Jango's lover for these past months, and who helped him recover the suit, only to be separated from Fett when pirates attacked their vessel. Next time we see him would be 9 years later, in 32 BBY, the same year as the Battle of Naboo. A terrorist group known as the Bando Gora were crippling industries crucial to the Republic. Darth Sidious knew that they were led by a fallen Jedi, and understood that any variables in the galaxy that he was not in charge of could prove to be a threat to his plans to bring about the revenge of the Sith. He would contact his own fallen Jedi, the Count who had become Darth Tyrannus, to task him with the mission of eliminating the Bando Gora. After the briefing, Dooku asks if his lord has any updates on the clone army.
Our cloners require a host. You must find an ideal specimen, perhaps among the galaxy's most dangerous mercenaries.
I shall accomplish both of these tasks with a single stroke, Master.
He would post a lucrative hit on the leader of the Gora, attracting the most elite hunters in the galaxy. At this time, Jango was in the middle of a Republic contract, closing in on the lifelong criminal Miko Ginty. He finds his target commanding a Borek in a pit fight in Outland Station, a popular waypoint in Hutt space. Using the viewfinder to zero in on his target, he eliminates both of the bodyguards with those powerful Westar 34s. Scaring his target off the platform and down into the pit, Jango would calmly descend with his jetpack and twirl his blasters back up to Miko.
Dead or alive, Miko.
But the crafty criminal used his neural remote to make the enormous bug take a swing at the Mandalorian, an attack that sends the pack flying off into the crowd. But the armor absorbed the blow, and Fett transfers the momentum into a roll back onto his feet. The carapace was so tough that it would take dozens of blasts to finally bring the creature down. Then Jango would have to give chase through the space station, blasting away Miko's allies, only to have him escape via a stolen speeder. As the Force would have it, this merchant was also selling a jetpack that he had just picked up from the arena, and Jango kindly asks for it back.
I'll take that off your hands.
How much you offering?
Your life.
After another chase through the shipping zone, Fett sees that Miko has made it back onto his ship, a Trimark 7 called the Longshot. At this point, Jango is already considered the most notorious bounty hunter in the galaxy by most, and Miko surely heard the legends of the Mandalorian that killed 6 Jedi with his bare hands. But a part of him wonders if this was just a myth. He decides that with the ship's laser cannons and rocket launchers, there was no way Jango could survive. But with a decade of use with this armor and tech, Fett was nearly unstoppable, using the jetpack to evade, while sending bolt after bolt into key ship systems. The long shot saw complete failure, a fiery wreck smashing down. Jango walked up to his target.
I hate to admit it, but you're worth more alive.
I'll get you for this, Fett.
Meanwhile, we see that another man wearing Mandalorian armor was completing a bounty of his own.
Tross, I can pay you double.
The man who had betrayed Jaster Muriel had found himself in a similar position to the punk kid he once despised. And again, he must have been driven mad at how this younger man was again demanding more fear and respect. Back at Jango's hangout on the Outland Station, he collects his bounty from his Toydarian associate, Rosada.
You're short, Ross. Not trying to swindle me, are you?
Hey, you're forgetting my finder's fee.
And she says that she already has another bounty for him, tossing a hollow projector onto the table.
Greetings, Jango Fett. I am Tyrannus. You are one of a select few chosen to participate in a special hunt for a special prey.
The Toydarian is stunned.
5 million Republic credits.
5 million? Wow, that could make you for life.
But she is afraid for Jango, saying this Bando Gora group was too dangerous even for him, that no one sent after them has ever come back alive.
Worried about losing your finder's fees?
Now that's not fair. You know I worry about you.
Jango is not afraid, and asks more about how this group works. Roz says she thinks they're behind the new Death Stick craze, and remembers that there was a small bounty on a Death Stick dealer on Coruscant. And as he leaves, we see that the Toydarian knew of the bad blood between Fett and the other Mando-seeming hunter.
I wouldn't be surprised if you ran into Montrose on this hunt.
I'd be surprised if I didn't.
This bounty centered around another relic of his past. It's unlikely that Fett would have known this, but Kamari Vosa was the one that he called Loudmouth in order to be killed first back on Galadran, the apprentice of Count Dooku, who fell to the dark side before her master. Over Coruscant, Jango emerges from hyperspace in his amphibious interstellar assault transport, or AIAT, a model of ship that was the precursor to the LAAT. It was called Jaster's Legacy, and at this point it was on its last legs, sputtering through space, something that Roz thought was ridiculous for such a well-paid merc. And she drops some insights that you would normally have to pay a psych droid for.
You ever think maybe you hang onto that ship? Those memories, because you're looking for someone to take under your own wing.
But with his briefing, he takes the old ship into a traffic lane and descends to a landing pad in the upper levels, making his way into a club that the target was known to frequent. When the bartender is resistant, Jango consults with his negotiators.
Listen, friend, I'm giving you a chance to save your club.
The club would erupt in blaster fire, but eventually he would find the dealer, wrapping him up with his trusty whipcord. The troubled youth knows he's in way over his head, and trades his life for the location of the warehouse that supplied the psychedelic substance. Fett would sneak his way into the facility, but the way this whole operation is run, the connection to the terrorist group, this enormous bounty, it all had Jango suspicious.
I've got a feeling these aren't ordinary death sticks. I'm transmitting a sample to you.
Taking a sample, he sends the data back to Roz for analysis. While Jango was blasting through the guards and working his way deeper into the warehouse, she confirms that these were no normal death sticks. They are laced with high levels of some unknown and untraceable neurotoxin. The trail would leave him into a carbon-freezing facility, where he stumbles upon his past.
Montrose.
It's been a long time, Jango. Again, it looks like we're after the same thing.
He had captured the local drug lord and froze him already, but used the process to kill him. A lengthy blaster duel would force Montrose to flee, and Jango believes that an operation this large couldn't have been pulled off without the help of some corrupt politicians. And with some searching through Groff's computer, he's able to find his next target. Jango's deadly barroom brawl had scared a senator from Ryloth.
I want out! You hear me? Out!
Well, what do you know? Senator Trell.
The hunter would make his way up to the plush apartment tower, and dangles the politician over the ledge. Though a bounty hunter, he is still driven by a strong Mandalorian sense of honor. Remember, his father was the journeyman protector that filled the shoes of Jaster Mareel after he had been exiled for killing a corrupt official. Now it was Jango's turn. After Senator Trell told him that the supplier was a dug on the planet Malastare, Republic security forces show up in a gunship, and Fett chooses to let gravity decide this corrupt senator's fate, dropping him over the edge, and then blasting away the gunship before making his escape. Back on his ship, he consults with Roz to learn more about this target. In order to get an audience with him, Roz suggests capturing someone Sebulto put a hit on. The problem is that this guy was incarcerated on Uvo 4.
But Jango, we are talking about a maximum security prison.
It's just another job, Roz. I'll slip in and out before they notice he's missing.
While he punches in the hyperspace coordinates, Jango asks about Montrose, and Roz pleads with him to leave this dangerous bounty hunter life, one that can only end with his death.
Jango, dear, you work too hard. You got money. Why don't you meet a nice girl, settle down, have a kid? You won't live forever, you know.
Emerging in the asteroid field of Uvo 4, we see Jango had mastered the trick of writing a ship's signature in space, following close behind a cargo ship that was making its approach to the prison complex.
Captain, my scopes just picked up a ghost image in our sensor wake. Probably another glitch.
By quickly darting off at the exact right moment, he was able to covertly set down on the asteroid. He knows this one will be tougher than normal, and makes sure to attach a fresh rocket to his jetpack. As he sneaks deeper and deeper into the facility, he comes across a worker named Smoody, who tells him some of the terrifying history of Kamari Vosa, and her rise to become leader of the Bando Gora.
On some barrier moon beyond the outer rim, say he seen this same Jedi girl lop the heads of them 2 prisoners in some bizarre ritual.
He takes Fett to the level containing Bendix Fust, but is shocked to see another bounty hunter beat him to the target. Her method sent the whole facility on high alert, but Jango can tell that they will have to work together.
Careful, Jango. Trust no one. Isn't that your motto?
In order to get out, they would have to shut down the shield generator, and so he contacts that worker Smoody, who tells him how to do it. But notice how the professional killer is worried about this plan that may hurt his newly created ally.
What about you?
Oh, don't worry about me, stranger. You'll be a fine day to cash it all in. See you on the other side, eh, stranger?
After setting the main reactor to blow, he makes his way to the nearby hangar to commandeer one of the patrol ships to get himself, this female hunter, and their target safely away from the prison. The ship was a Firespray 31 model, a craft made by Kuat Drive Yards for patrolling the dangerous asteroid field prison complex. After liftoff, he spins around and sends 2 torpedoes as a parting shot, setting off a chain reaction that not only took out the other ships that might have given pursuit, but much of the asteroid itself. Montross gets an alert of this escape and notices Sebulto had a bounty on someone there, reasoning that this must be Jango working a lead on the Bando Gora case. Back in the Firespray 31, the Huntress introduces herself.
I'm Zamwazel.
You must be new to the business.
Why, because you haven't heard of me?
No, because you're reckless.
And as they debate the merits of her plan, he points out that her recklessness cost him Jaster's legacy.
This babe is a big improvement over that relic.
She's a Firespray Pursuit Special, one of 6 prototypes manufactured for the prison. She's the last of her kind now.
Fett goes on to explain how now in the Republic records, this would be a dead craft.
I've deactivated her transponder. They'll assume she was destroyed with the rest. We're in the clear.
He makes his first jump to lightspeed in the craft that would come to symbolize Fett. As the pair pull up to Malastare, he explains why she will be the one to make the delivery, and how he will sneak his way back towards Sebulto's compound. After eliminating some Dug guards, he meets back up with Zam.
For a second there, I thought you were gonna blast me.
Don't worry, you're still more useful to me alive.
Thanks a lot.
Jango would rush into the compound in search of the Death Stick factory, and eventually discovers the criminal's throne room. After a firefight, the Dug flees down a secret passage, a chute that leads right into the drug processing center. But Sebulto doesn't stick his landing. His target was dead, but he would still have to blast his way out of this enormous underground facility, eventually coming upon a ship that was used to transport the illicit goods. He thinks he can search through its logs to see where it has been, but this type of craft brings up bad memories from the time that he was a slave.
Looks like a slaver ship.
Yeah, I know.
As he starts hacking into the terminal, Montross reappears. And as they fight, they talk about the moments that changed both of their lives. How Montross caused the death of their leader, and Jango's subsequent leadership saw the death of all of the true Mandalorians.
After I left, you're the one who led the Mandalorians to their deaths.
We were betrayed.
To the Jedi. So I heard.
In the firefight, Jango would disable his ship, but the Mandalorian pretender was still able to run away. Zam would swoop in on the Firespray, and when she puts it together that Kamari Vosa was the head of the Bando Gora, that Fett and Montross must have some secret invite to take down this crazed cult leader, she wants to know more.
Wait a minute, I've heard that name. She's that Bando Gora head case. What's the prize, Fett? Tell me.
More than you'd make in a lifetime.
As he catches her up on the neurotoxins and the drugs, Wazell thinks she knows why.
Instant brainwashing.
Jango had discovered that Vosa was on some unknown moon outside the galaxy, that there were shipments that were sent to the outer rim wasteland of Tatooine, working with the Hutts to use their vast shipping networks to move the Death Sticks. And Mama Raz was happy to see Jango with a lady friend.
You didn't tell me your new partner was such a looker.
She's got nothing on you, Ross.
This was one race season after her friend and fellow Tordarian Watto had lost everything he had betting against Anakin.
Poor sap lost everything in a pod race last season.
His only hope was to get some credits from a finder's fee, broadcasting out bounties that were taken out by Jabba the Hutt personally. Fett would find himself in the middle of a power struggle between Gardulla and Jabba, which would determine who would become the crime boss of Tatooine. While Jango was tracking down his target, Sam would go to Gardulla to see if there was any evidence that she was the Hutt connected to the Gora. And Raz has one final question before they depart.
Did you name that new ship of yours yet?
She's called Slave One.
Perhaps a reference to the rush of difficult memories which Jango had just been flooded by on the previous mission, seeing that slave ship. Fett's battle would take him across multiple neighborhoods in Mos Espa, a whole blocks and landing pads that were swarming with thugs. Eventually he would make it to his target, and the scum thinks he had Jango outnumbered.
Hear that, boys? He's scared.
Difficult to decide whether any of you live.
When the smoke cleared, the target was dead, and Jango wasted no time throwing him down at Jabba's tail. The Hutt gives the credits due, but Jango pushes for information on the Bando Gora. Jabba is insulted to be accused of working with their kind, and tells him that Gardulla would have all the answers he needs. This unlikely alliance might prove to be life-changing for the two of them. If they could pull this off, Jabba would be the most powerful Hutt, and Jango the most powerful bounty hunter. He returns to his ship to tell Zam of the secret tunnel entrance Jabba revealed to him, but on the comm he hears his ally being captured. Before all signal was lost, he would have to rush through the passage, killing all sorts of local wild animals, like the Mastiffs and Tusken Raiders. Once he makes it into Gardulla's palace, he finds Zam in her cell. She says that she was able to spot the vault, and a chain around the slug's neck has the key. Jango says to wait here while he completes the mission. Zam was a newer bounty hunter, but she wasn't that stupid.
Guards!
The Gamorrean guards were able to haul Fett before their slimy overlord, and she takes great joy in seeing this hunter betrayed, breaking the news that Zam was a shapeshifter, a member of the Clawdite species. Despite what credit she could get for him, the slug decides to feed Fett to her crate dragon. In the pit, the towering beast stood ready to consume the Mandalorian, but Jango still had his most reliable weapons, his fists and his wits, knocking out the green pigs and taking an escape through a small shaft. Jango would have to reclaim all of his gear by relying on his martial arts, killing countless guards on his climb up to Gardulla's suite. When Fett steals the key off of the Hutt's neck, she is confused until he asks her the location of Kamari Vosa, a question that makes her laugh in astonishment. She says he has no idea what he's facing, and refuses to give up any info. With the crate dragon screaming in the pit below, Fett comes up with an efficient way to dispose of this Hutt. A few pushes, and the thousands of pounds of slug are sent tumbling down to become food for her own pet. But sadly for the dragon, this room contained the vault. It was simply too dangerous to leave it, or any of the guards that showed up, alive. After they were all dispatched with a flurry of blaster bolts and a jetpack missile, with the area clear, he makes his way into the vault. But the data is encrypted. He has to send it to Roz for processing, and she laments the news that the girl she was hoping would become Mrs. Fett was a changeling all along.
I should have known better.
Oh, Jango, I was hoping you could get together.
Before he leaves Tatooine, he goes back to Zam's cell to call her out for this deception. Despite her pleas, Jango just walks away. As the Slave One prepares to go into hyperspace, he gets horrible news about the only person Jango actually cared for.
Rose, do you copy?
Sorry, Jango. Took a while to get her to hand over that data.
You just signed your death warrant.
The usually stoic, cool-headed warrior was now burning with rage, smashing the hollow screen on his new ship, and frantically making the jump to Outland Station. Jango races in to see her lying on the floor dying, surrounded by the destruction Montross wrought. He wants to rescue her, but there were thermal detonators set to explode, set to take Fett down with her. She was resigned to her fate. In her own way, she chose to be involved in the violent bounty hunter life too, and she doesn't want Jango to mourn her death, but to try and find some meaning in life.
Get Vosa, collect your reward. Just find something to live for besides the money.
And the Slave One would pull off just seconds before the whole space station was reduced to debris. The Slave One was now headed to the coordinates Ross was able to decipher, a compound on the 4th moon of Bogdan. As soon as he arrives, he is swarmed by hundreds of slaves, who had become violent, mind-controlled demons under the influence of the neurotoxin-infused death sticks. Jango would fight his way into their twisted city, a death cult that revolved around a strange mixture of dark side energy and spirit divination, as this place was known by locals as the Moon of the Dead, being a moon that had been used as a mass grave dump site for millennia, a place various warlords used over eons to dispose of the evidence of their war crimes. All of this perverse and evil energy was tapped into by the cult's queen, the fallen Jedi Kamari Vosa. Jango would make his way through some of the enormous pits of rotting flesh, before moving into the underground catacombs. Emerging into yet another graveyard, he sees the ship of his arch-rival, and his blood begins to boil. At an enormous gate, he sees Montross waiting. They trade words before their final showdown, and what Montross is so impressed with concerning the Bando Gora is ironic, given Jango's eventual fate with the Clone Army.
Imagine, Jango, the power to send thousands of mindless assassins willingly to their deaths, to plunge the galaxy into anarchy.
The fallen Mando taunts Fett, saying they are one and the same. When the West Star 34s come out, Montross is surprised he doesn't want to fight like a true Mandalorian.
Not the Mandalorian way.
You gave up our ways, remember?
After a rocket and some well-placed bolts, the man who betrayed Jaster Mareel 20 years ago, who killed Ross, the only person Jango had been attached to in decades now, that traitor to all the Mandawade would be left to die, pleading that he deserved an honorable death at the hands of a Mandalorian, but Jango callously walks away, leaving Montross to be ripped to shreds by the mindless Bando Gora slaves, screaming his way into his grave like a wounded animal. No honor.
Jango! Come back!
From here it would be a trek through the dark caves and mist-shrouded canyons. Hundreds of Gora would be slain, but as he entered the evil citadel, the mindless grunts were able to overpower the greatest hunter in the galaxy, knocking him unconscious and locking him into a torture rack. The evil queen would make her introduction.
The blast helmet of a Mandalore warrior. Something I've not seen since I was a Jedi. I must have cut down 20 of your kind myself.
He tries to figure out who hired Fett, and gets in some of the details on how she was captured as a Padawan and warped by this cult, only to rise and become their leader. As she moves away, she censors another unwanted guest. Zam knew this was a high-paying job, and used the tracker she had left in the Slave One to follow him to the Death Moon. The rookie fails to take the quick shot, giving Vosa the chance to activate her 2 curved-hilt red lightsabers. Zam blasts away, but bolts are deflected, one eventually striking the hunter. Though she felt Jango had betrayed her, she knows again they would have to work together, using the next 2 shots to free the Mandalorian from his restraints. Jango springs to his feet and gets his Westars back, snapping away at the fallen Jedi. But each bolt is effortlessly sent away as Vosa flips to her retreat. Jango rushes to comfort Zam, and when she shows that she is too weak, Jango Fett gears up, ready to honor Raz's dying wish and secure the most lucrative bounty hunting contract in history. Pushing through another maze of catacombs, he catches up with the Bando Gora Queen. In this small room, Jango would have to use his jetpack to secure the high ground, the only way to dodge those blades and rain down fire from a position that would be more awkward to deflect. This would work to force her to retreat into the throne room, where the firepower eventually overwhelmed the Jedi, her death throes seeing a burst of dark side energy as she collapsed to the floor.
Which will it be, bounty hunter? Dead or alive?
Congratulations, bounty hunter.
Tyrannus.
Dooku is thoroughly impressed with his performance. As Jango sees that this was all a complicated Jedi drama, he wonders why Dooku wouldn't just kill her himself.
To find you. This contest brought you to me. Of course. 5 million, was it? Or much more, if you'll come with me to Camino. A chance at immortality, to pass on your ways to an army crafted in your image.
I want the first clone for myself, unmodified.
Before he departs, he is too honorable to leave behind the hunter that saved his life, but also not too generous with the credits.
We're going to split the bounty 50-50, right?
Don't push your luck, Sam.
We would learn that all this time Jango was completing this mission, Dooku was doing his research on this Mandalorian prospect. He had captured one of Jango's old friend, back from the True Mandalorian days, a fellow grunt named Silas. With applying via the use of force, electroshock, and chemical agents, he finally got Silas to reveal Jango's backstory, recounting the rise of Fett. Once he got what he needed, coldly tells the droid to stop his heart, killing this old friend of Jango just moments before speaking with the hunter. After the death of Vosa, Dooku would return to his castle to be greeted by his master, Lord Sidious hailing him via holo. The Dark Lord wants to be sure that Jango Fett was the right choice, and his apprentice recounts the events of Galadran. Tyrannus still shook by the fact that he killed 6 Jedi with his bare hands. And I think here is a good place to pause. We have seen Jango's rise from farm boy to the greatest bounty hunter in the galaxy, about to secure the greatest contract in the history of the profession. In part 2, we'll see how the next decade would change Fett and the rest of the galaxy forever, as he will again become the Mandalore, raising an army and a child that will become his legacy, torn between his warrior ways, his role as a father, and the struggle for what it means to be a Fett, when millions of clone copies claim to be just like him. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss it, and please leave a like and comment, as it really helps promote the video on YouTube. You can support the channel by picking up some cool Star Wars metal print art, or getting a free Audible audiobook, all linked in the description below. There you can also find our Patreon and PayPal. For just $1, your name could be here, and special shout out to our $25 tier: Chris Garcia, Seraph Diaz, Cass Costello, Carlos Velez, and C7 Go. But most important of all, remember, the fate of the galaxy far, far away always seems to be decided by dusty farm boys, and the Force will be with you, always.